Hi, I'm Harry Rock, and welcome to another edition of the Westfield Council on Aging Presents. This is a special collaborative effort between Michael Squindo, Executive Director of the Westfield Senior Center, Tina Gorman, COA Special Projects Coordinator, and Pete Coles, producer of WCPC Westfield Cable Channel 15. Our topic today is AARP Tax Assistance Program. And my guest, as you can see in front of you on the screen, is Tina Gorman, Council on Aging Special Projects Coordinator, and Dan Welch, who is a local tax coordinator for the AARP Tax Assistance Program. We're going to be talking about the technical tax aspects of the AARP Tax Assistance Program with Dan Welch, and the Westfield COA protocol for the building, including the same-day drop-off, pickup, and all the other specifics related to the program so that you can be ready for it once tax season begins. So I want to welcome Tina. Nice to always have you in the studio. And Dan, I haven't seen you in a long time, but nice to have you back in the studio. Before we get started, I just want to say to Tina Gorman, I'm so used to you being the grand poobah, the executive director of the Senior Center. You are now officially retired from that position, but you are in a new position, and want to congratulate you on that. I know you're excited about it, but can you just give our viewers a quick update as to what you are doing and what they can expect from you now, because you're still linked and still associated with the Senior Center.
I'm not even going anywhere near the R word, that everybody, if one more person asked me, are you retired? No, not retired, but I did step down from the executive director position. Michael Squindo, who had been the former director in Agawam, is now the director in Westfield. We call that the director shuffle. There's a lot of directors moving. There's a lot of moving parts right now in Western Mass. So I am now the special projects coordinator. That was a position that I applied for within the department. It's a fairly newly created position. So I will be still coordinating a lot of the programs that I had a hand in prior to my taking this position as executive director, one of them being the AARP Tax Assistance Program. So I'll continue to coordinate that. I'll be overseeing the companion program, which Joyce Peregrine is the coordinator for that program. So I will now oversee her and that program. The Senior Citizen Property Tax Work-Off Program falls under my domain. The Voice of Experience newsletter, I am working on that.
Right, sure.
I'm trying to meet that deadline. And a lot of the clinicals. So a lot of the support groups, I'll continue to run the side-by-side support group, kind of oversee some of the other support groups, the diabetes support group and some of the others, and then hope to add some. And then I'm also liaison to the Pride Inc., in Westfield. So lots of different, and the Retire the Fire. How could I forget about that? So that was my brainchild, and so I will continue that program. So some of the grant-funded programs that I've worked on, I will continue to write those grants, oversee those programs. And of course, I still am going to attend all the parties and, do my dancing and my singing and have fun. And so, it is a reduction in hours for me. So my family's thrilled with that, and I am as well. It's kind of time to.
Well, I want to congratulate you on the reduction in hours. However, as I listen to all that you're
still
doing, I'm thinking, where's the reduction coming in?
Well, it is. I no longer manage the staff. I no longer have to worry about the building. If something doesn't work or the freezer or whatever, that's not under my domain anymore. So happy to pass that along to Mr. Squindo.
Keep the things that you really enjoy doing.
Exactly.
Well, you've done a phenomenal job for
the
city of Westfield, and I know you are deeply and highly regarded and adored by the seniors of our community. So we're glad that you're still associated with it.
I'm still here.
We're glad to have you.
Thank you.
We don't want to lose you anytime soon. So Dan Welch, we want to welcome you to the show. Thrilled to have you here. We were talking off air before we got here, so I got a little sense of what you've been doing. So you're a gentleman that retired, but decided that you didn't like retirement so much, so you've gotten really, really busy doing a lot of other things, of which this is one of those.
It took about 6 months to get out of the retirement mode and back into trying to do something.
Didn't take long. Right. So give me an overview of exactly what is this program and what are your responsibilities related to it?
Okay. The AARP Tax Aid Program is a function of the IRS and AARP collaborate. So the tax background, tax knowledge, and all the equipment is provided by the IRS. It's a national program, been around for over 50 years. We've been in the Westfield Senior Center for a long time, a lot longer before I was involved, to provide tax assistance and actual tax return preparation for mostly senior citizens, but it's not limited to just seniors. We call it people over 50.
Oh, okay.
Typically, but the majority, 90% of our clientele are over 60, and low to moderate income. Many of them can't afford or don't have the extra income to go pay to have their taxes done, so we do it for free.
Wow.
Our volunteers, we have 8 volunteers that work out of the Westfield Senior Center 2 days a week during the tax season, so February 5th through the end of the season, April 15th, or in this case, April 17th in Massachusetts. We'll do about 360 plus or minus. We got room for more with our 8 volunteers that are very experienced. We do extensive training with returning volunteers as well as new recruits each year. So we try to add some new people throughout the offices. Our district is Hampshire, Hamden, and Franklin County, but my focus is just as a local coordinator is just on Westfield.
Okay. Wow. And I'm sorry, how long have you been doing
This
this?
is my 6th, I'm coming into my 6th tax season this year.
Wow, 60.
So as soon as I retired that next year, I applied and got accepted to be trained officially by the AARP side, and I love it. I can't wait for the seasons to start.
Is that right?
I took up a new role last year, as well as I also helped train all of our new volunteers. We just finished last week with 20 new volunteers that'll fill in our 3-county district this year. So
Now, as I understand, you are a volunteer. You don't get
it's
paid
all
for
volunteer, nothing remunerated. I don't expect anything. It's amazing how many of the seniors really, really appreciate the service.
this. And all the volunteers that you train and work with are all
They're
volunteers,
all volunteers.
as well.
They'll work between 100 and 120 hours each during the season, so 6 or 7 hours a day for some days. Some work 1 day a week, some work 3 or 4 days a week. We actually do 2 days a week. Our crew comes into Westfield.
Are
twice a
most
week.
of the volunteers you work with, do they have experience in working with taxes before? Or
Some
of
did.
them
Some had
totally
worked for H&R
newbies?
Block. One of our fellows has the IRS background. Most of them have done their own taxes. Some work for there's another program in the Springfield area, VITA, similar operation, more federal government, not tied to AARP. Some came from that. H&R Block, former employees that want to do something different and continue to volunteer.
So, Tina, you brought Dan in, is that correct?
Well, actually, Dan was correct in saying the program in Westfield was here when I came. Now, I've been with the Council on Aging for 18 years, and this program had already been established, I would say, on a much smaller scale. They were doing 2 mornings a week, so like 9 to 12, and there were fewer volunteers. So, and it was a smaller space. If you recall, we were in the old senior center.
Right,
we didn't have a lot of, we didn't have a lot of space. So I just kind of came into it, and then it was really the AARP people who they tell us who's coming, who's coordinating, who your volunteers are. So we really just facilitate in terms of the space. And I think, different senior centers do it a little differently. So some senior centers are quite hands-off. It's just, here's the space, do what you do. We tend to be, because I'm way more hands-on than all of that. And, so we tend to be fairly hands-on with trying to be involved and make it as easy for the volunteers as possible, as easy for the seniors as possible. So we really try to, kind of take up the slack and work, collaboratively with Dan and his team.
And so where does it take place in the senior center now?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that. So now we've tried a variety of places. And last year, if you recall, we were working on the second floor renovation.
Right,
so everything was moved around. So we had them in the great room downstairs, which was nice. They were all in one big room, but it also meant that we couldn't use that room on those 2 days.
Right.
So this year we'll be back upstairs. So Dan and the volunteers will have the multipurpose room, and they'll also have the learning center. So they'll kind of be down the hall. So some of them will be in one room, some in the other. But, it's close proximity. But last year was kind of nice. They were all in one big space.
Right.
I think they like that.
So, Dan, the volunteers that come in, are you recruiting them, or they've already been recruited, or they have stepped forward because they've heard about it?
They've offered. primarily. They've heard about it, read it on the AARP site. They apply through the site, they get queried.
Oh, okay.
And then, once they get through the COA process, we do a 6-day, so it's about a 30-hour training session. They do testing. They have about 75 tax returns that they prepare in preparation, so they're learning the tax laws.
They have to do 75 to
Yep.
prepare?
Yep.
Oh, my God.
It's a big
Yeah,
operation.
they're well trained. We monitor them. So I basically just coordinate their activities, and every tax return that we do, one of us prepares it. It's handed off to another, one of our more experienced preparers, and done a quality review. So they actually do it a second time, and then we bring the senior citizens back in to review it with them, explain it to them, and have them sign it. So it's pretty extensive. It works very well, and then we submit everything electronically. So when the senior citizen leaves,
Oh, wow.
they have a packet of tax information, but we submit both the state and federal return electronically, so they don't have to do
So
anything.
it's all on the computers right there in the senior center?
They provide they being the AARP Foundation provide us with computers.
Okay.
I have a local private network that's secure, so we can do between 25 and 30 returns a day with our volunteers.
Wow.
That's what it adds up, and you get to the end of the season, you say, wow, we did that many returns. It's interesting to
Have
do.
you ever had to turn away a volunteer because they just weren't getting it, or?
They usually wash out themselves after the first couple of days. They just get totally confused
Okay.
and just don't understand they don't have to know all the tax laws, but you got to know. I mean, for senior citizens, they're going to have some work part-time, so they have wages. Most all get Social Security of some form, a pension, taking money out of their 401ks, bank interest. A couple or a few have a part-time job or a small business, so we can do a Schedule C business if we need to. There aren't many that way. So there's some. Then you have to keep up on the tax laws. We'll do a couple more reviews for our local coordinators for new taxes. We'll talk about that later, the new tax laws, both federal and the state, that they have to think about for the next year.
I would think that's a complex part of the assignment because the tax laws, and I've got some friends who are CPAs, and they just say every year it just gets more and more complex. And then there are times when they just can't figure out what the IRS wants.
Right, no
because
question about that, no question.
They're backpedaling or they haven't figured it out
Right.
themselves.
A couple of years ago, when they had an argument or discussion during COVID, they paid a lot more unemployment out. And was it going to be taxed or not taxed? And it was confusion right up until almost the 1st of April with the state return as to how to do that. So we had to sit
Right.
on a lot of that stuff.
Right, right.
Just the way it is, and that's how they operate.
So I've got some specific questions for you, and then we'll get into some of the other details as we get deeper into this interview. I guess the first question is, and I've heard people talk about that, do you have to file taxes after age 65? I think I know the answer to that, but there are some people that think, oh, well, once I hit 65, I don't have to file taxes anymore.
Unfortunately, yes, you have to. Age has no bearing from 55 to 65 to 75 and beyond. It has no bearing at all. It's tied strictly to the income. And the
Okay.
threshold to have to file is pretty small, pretty low. Just to cite your numbers. If you make less than $15,700 as a single taxpayer, which you can't live on that today,
Right.
you have to file. 27.7 if you're married. Again, a married couple is not going to live on 27.7
Right,
unless they have everything paid for and
Right.
somebody's subsidizing everything they do.
right,
So in that case, yes, you have to file,
yeah,
both state and federal, kind of that threshold. In fact, we even encourage seniors, if they happen to be to the point they don't have to file, I encourage them to still file. That protects their identity. 'Cause every year, we had 3 people last year with identity stolen.
Oh, really?
And it's going to only get worse. So that they file, the first tax return in gets submitted. If you send one in late, it's going to say timeout, you already filed, or somebody filed under your name and social security number. So we're working through those issues, but if you file, then you've protected that in the IRS world of financial security if you file. So I still say you ought to come file. We're willing to file them now.
Yeah, sure. And Social Security payments, most of us who are retired are now receiving Social Security. Is that taxable income?
Probably half the taxpayers, yes, half no. That's, again, it's based on the threshold of income.
Okay.
If an individual makes over 25,000, so that's Social Security plus their wages, pension withdrawals. If it's over 25,000, so again, that's not a very high threshold.
No, it isn't.
Then a portion of the Social Security gets taxed,
Okay.
and it's 37,000 or 32,000 for married couples,
Okay.
and then it's on a scale. Once you hit the income threshold, 50% is taxed, up to 85%. So the maximum is 85, but that's still like a significant portion of somebody's Social Security. So 85% Social Security if you're over 34,000, again, with wages plus any kind of pension withdrawals or 401k, IRA withdrawals, or a pension payment from a previous employer, you hit that 34,000 pretty quick. So then Social Security becomes taxable.
So I'm on Social Security, so and I'm well over that threshold, fortunately. But I'm at 85, so 85% of my
Of your Social Security,
Social Security
gross Social
coming in
Security,
is being taxed. Okay.
will be taxed, yes.
Okay, that's interesting. I did
just
not
as a
know that.
regular, same rate as your regular
Right.
earnings are taxed. Yeah.
So there's a term that when I was prepping for this that I'd never heard before. It's the mass circuit breaker. I'm thinking circuit breaker. That's how I turn my lights on and off with.
Right.
What is that?
Yeah, we got some great news for that for this year. We'll get into that in a second. But the state of Massachusetts many years ago created this for low-earning senior citizens. You have to be 65 to qualify. And if their property taxes, and many of them still like to maintain a home, stay in their homes as long as they can, so they're paying property taxes when they do, and half their water and sewer bills, which isn't a significant amount compared to taxes, if half of those exceed 10% of their gross income, then they qualify for a circuit breaker refundable credit. And I use the word refundable because there's a lot of credits that they get on their return, both federal and state, mostly on the federal side, that are non-refundable. So if you don't owe taxes, so at that threshold where you've had we'll talk about standard deduction later and itemizing, if they don't owe anything after the standard deduction comes off, then it's non-refundable. Yeah, they qualified, but they don't get the money. Circuit breaker is one of the few from the state of Massachusetts that whether you owe money or not, you get this money back. So it's our senior citizens, many of them file only to get the circuit breaker because it's so valuable for them. They're going to get a check in the mail. In the past, up to $1,200 was the maximum pre-2023, and they get it no matter if they owe taxes or not. If they owe taxes, they'll reduce their tax bill.
Okay.
If they owe nothing, which many of them don't owe anything, they were in the past they got the full $1,200. Renters qualify, except the threshold of the rent is 25% of income. So not a lot of renters qualify. A few, but not many. But many, I don't remember the numbers we had. I would say almost 27 or 28% of our taxpayers last year that were over 65, and most of them were qualified for some payment.
Can you give that formula again?
Yes, I'll try to read it right off my paper for you to get it exactly right. They have to be over 65.
Okay.
They have to make less than, check my notes here, 64,000. That's a pretty high threshold.
Okay.
So if they're less than that, you get a portion. It's all prorated based on, we add up their property taxes. They have to own their own home, but the property taxes and half the water and sewer bills.
Wow.
So on our information that we ask them to bring in, we always bring in your water and sewer because it takes 5 minutes or less to run it through our computer and say, yes, you qualify, or no, you don't. Now, the best news is, it's been in the works for 3 or 4 years. They increased, I said the maximum used to be $1,200. It used to go up $30 or $40 a year. It's $2,590, so
Wow.
$2,590
Huge jump.
for
Significant.
2023.
Wow.
And I compliment the state for wanting to give back to the senior citizens because you got to be, as I said before, over 65 to be able to pay it back out. And the upper income threshold, 27% qualified last year. And in the Westfield group, 360 plus or minus returns, we paid $120,000. Went back to senior citizens based on the credit. Some got none, some got the full 1,200, but the total for our returns in Westfield was $120,000. It'll go up this year just because of that more than doubling of the maximum they can get. So that's going to be some really good news to taxpayers.
I'm just going to say to our viewers, this should be enough of a reason to incentivize you to come in and get involved with this AARP tax assistance program, because there's money potentially available to you coming back. And this is something I didn't know about, and I'm sure for a lot of our viewers, they probably aren't aware of it either, so they should get in
And we talk it up. Our clientele is the senior citizen base, typically, and we talk it up. We'll ask them. You can look at their income, but go get your tax bills. We have a great relationship. We're on a speed dial number with the city clerk's office. People forget to bring them in. They get 3 out of 4. They forget where they put their tax bills because they get 4 a year in Westfield.
Right.
We'll help them get it. We'll send them down to get a copy back, and they're good with us at City Hall to help us. They know what we're after. So they help us collect the information, and we'll do everything in the world to get it for them because it's a refundable credit, which means if they qualify, no matter their tax liability, they're going to get it. And I said before, many, many people, the only reason they file is to get that money back.
Right.
They owe no taxes. They don't. Income is not above the standard deduction, so that they get some money back. So it's a smile on their face.
Yeah.
They can take somebody out to dinner.
Yeah,
Actually, it's going to pay. Most cases, it's going to pay at least one of their quarterly tax bills.
Oh, absolutely.
size
Yeah,
of
that's
their
what they
house.
really should be doing. Just put that back towards their taxes they owe.
Yep.
So let's ask why do most people not itemize expenses on their tax returns? I'm thinking that they're just going very simple and putting in their basics information, but should be people thinking about itemizing?
Probably not. The goal of the IRS a few years ago was to be able to submit your tax returns on a postcard.
Right.
Well, they're still 2 pages long. So they haven't they've shortened it up from 3 pages to 2 pages. But they increased in 2017 to discourage itemization, which some cases was abused with donations and what was deductible, what
Yeah,
wasn't.
sure.
So they increased it significantly. It used to be in the $3,000 or $4,000 range, and you also got additional credit. Again, most of our taxpayers that we do returns for don't have. They may have a disabled person living with them, they get credit for that. Some of us, none of us here, have kids that we're still deducting at home, but if some people were, they got a big child tax credit. They took that away, but they increased the standard deduction to discourage it. The standard deduction, again, I'll just read the exact numbers. For a single person, $15,700. So your itemized expenses have to exceed $15,700 for single, $30,700 for male, for married. So if you take their medical expenses, which have to exceed 7.5% of their gross income, so the first 7.5% is on you. So that's the cost of medical premiums, out of pocket, prescription drugs or co-pays, whatever it might be. Anything over 7.5% is deductible. They add in mortgage interest and property taxes, but the average senior citizen doesn't have a mortgage, fortunately. They worked hard to get it paid off and not encumber with anymore. So they lose that interest deduction, or don't have it anymore. They don't pay it out, so they don't have a deduction. Massachusetts, or it's a federal, at the same time, they capped property tax exemptions and state taxes at $10,000. So if somebody owns a house that's higher value, or may own 2 pieces of property, because they both are deductible. I have a condo and I have a house, so my combined taxes are over $10,000. They cap it at $10,000, so you just lose some of that deductible amount. Charitable deductions then become part of the deduction if you itemize. So to exceed $15,700 for a single person, or $30,700 for somebody that's both of them have to be over 65, that's a lot of money. So 95% of our clients don't itemize anymore.
Right.
So it makes it easier for us. They'll bring in the medical bills, and you can quickly look at their total, and you add it up. They just don't need them anymore. I think we did 15 taxpayers last year out of 360 that itemized.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow.
it's virtually non-existent.
You know, I personally don't even bother with it anymore. I used to be fastidious. I had this little spreadsheet, and, you know, I'd set it up with my accountant so that when I would go in, he could see, okay, this is where you're putting all your money and all of it. We're very generous to all the local organizations
Correct,
in town. We can't meet the threshold.
That's same. We're
So we
same boat.
don't even bother, which actually makes life easy because
Right.
unfortunately I have nothing to deduct.
Right.
But it just makes it easy.
Yeah,
We just bring in our
Yeah.
As I said, 15 out of 360 last year for
Right.
us. So
Wow.
they just don't meet it.
Yeah.
So if they have extremely high catastrophic medical bills, they might get up into that area. But that's really the only reason that they would ever get above that. So
Right. What is the deadline for filing taxes?
Massachusetts this year is April 17th.
Okay.
We always have that April 15th Monday holiday,
Right.
so it goes a day or two after. This year it's April 17th.
Right.
So, and we'll start about February 5th is our planned start date.
Oh, okay. That was the other
We have
question.
to wait for people to get all the stuff in the mail. So all their information from the bank for interest and the Fidelities and the Vanguards that send in any documents for mutual funds or stocks that they may own, they'll have to get that in before
February 5th?
we're going to start February 5th.
5th, okay.
So the simple returns, if they don't have a lot of investment activity, they'll have it by February 5th. And we'd rather front load the schedule to take care of more people on the back end
Right.
that may get their paperwork late or forget to get a schedule or
Right.
aren't ready
Right.
to do in the March time periods.
Yeah, so just a reminder to everyone, you need to make sure you have all of your paperwork in and all the returns that you would expect before you schedule a time to come down, because it isn't going to get finished and you're going to have to make a second trip, so.
Yeah, Tina will talk about the process that she
We'll
goes
talk
through
about the schedule
Yeah.
to
process.
support us, and it's tremendous support. If we had to make all the appointments, we'd go crazy.
Right,
So the senior center does that for us, and a tremendous asset for that. But we give everybody a checklist of everything we need to see. Give us your history. Do you have this, this, and this? Yes or
Okay.
no? And if you're unsure, we'll do a probing question to ask, so that if they pick up the pack, they have to have the packet, and they fill out the paperwork properly. It makes it easier for us, and it's a really good bullet point, things of here's what you need to bring in.
great. Are there any new changes to the tax code for
A few.
2023?
Again, I'm going to try to read a few of them off because I don't want
Sure.
to get them wrong. On the federal side, they've increased the energy home improvement credit. Used to be $500 lifetime credit. Now it's $1,200 annual credit. So that would be
wow.
super energy efficient windows. Some of the new high efficiency furnaces or air conditioners qualify. I say some. There's some stipulations that qualify for each one, but now that credit, because they want to save energy. The government's pushing that angle, so that's how they're doing it. The standard deduction I talked before was $30,700 for a married couple. That's up $1,800 per taxpayer from last year. So they keep increasing that threshold every year. That goes up
Oh,
every
wow,
year. So it's up
wow.
$1,800 this year.
Okay,
There's a few other credits in the child tax credit, earned income credit, but again, most seniors don't qualify for those, so I won't get into details. The mass side, there's been more. I talked about the circuit breaker increase, more than double that. Rental deduction. So if somebody rents, whether they qualify for circuit breaker or not, if you rent, even if it's subsidized, you can deduct the rent up to, it used to be $3,000, now it's $4,000. Comes off your gross taxable income. So it's advantageous to do that. Short-term capital gains, so that's anything that they owned for less than a year. They decreased that from 12% to 8.5% this year for Massachusetts. The long-term stays the same. I wish they would reduce that because typically somebody invests over a period of time. Those stay, that's still at 12%, so it's still favorable. But they've also increased, it won't affect our tax returns, but something that they may want to know about is that in the past, the Taxachusetts moniker that people blame or kind of hang
Right,
on, pat
right.
for Massachusetts, or the government for Massachusetts, was the threshold for estate tax. It used to be $1 million. Somebody that owns a house long-term and has built some value in that house, it's not hard to get above $1 million.
I know,
Yeah.
it's hard to believe
know.
that,
So
right?
it comes
Yep.
comes by over your lifetime. That's now increased to $2 million.
Oh, really?
The federal is huge. Federal's like $15 million, 12 or $15 million.
Wow.
Now it's $2 million in Massachusetts. So that's a huge increase for somebody that's in that category, that you don't trigger any tax. And once you get above the $2 million threshold, then it's taxable from dollar one. So it's going to save you a significant amount of money. It's about $100,000 you're going to save with that $1 million to $2 million
Yeah, right.
increase. The other one that's going to be confusing for people is we talked about the itemized deductions. Or we just stopped doing it. So we don't want to see your receipts anymore. Well, guess what? On the Mass side, we need them. There's a benefit. Small benefit, but there's a benefit. So Massachusetts is going to let you take up to $1,000 of cash charitable deductions. And I emphasize the word cash because it doesn't include clothing or if you donate furniture to the Goodwill or Salvation Army. It's only cash side. But that can be churches, any other nonprofits, AARP, Red Cross, those type of charities, up to 1,000. You can deduct that this year. So we now got to increase or enhance our paperwork
Yep.
to go out and now bring them back to us, because obviously all of our clientele will be Massachusetts related returns. So the full $1,000 will give them a $50 lower tax bill. Not huge, but $50 is $50 in
Yeah,
their pocket.
and I'll tell you, as I think about, I'm sure you're in the same situation we are, when I think about the charitable donations that Ann and I make, it doesn't take long to reach $1,000
doesn't.
Yeah.
anymore.
It doesn't.
Oh, yeah,
The church
absolutely.
And all the
donations.
agencies and churches
Yep.
and
Yep.
youth organizations,
Yep.
senior center,
Yeah, absolutely.
it's amazing how fast that
Yep.
can add up. So
Yep.
people should think
Yep.
about
They
that.
could start saving them, and
Right.
they say you got to have detailed reports. We don't send anything in with their tax return except the information. But if they have the receipts, if they get audited, it's probably not an auditable type item for the $50 credit, but there's always a risk.
Yeah.
We tell our taxpayers that we're doing the return for them. So we're only as good as what they give us. So if they give us something, miss something, forget something, it's still, when they have them sign the return, say, this is your return that we did for you based on the information you gave us. So, none of that stuff goes in paperwork-wise, but it's, so we're going to have to relearn the habit of saving that charitable information.
Right.
And we can probe some questions of church. Yeah, I give $50 a week, or I give $20 a week. Okay, it's $500. It'll add up pretty quick.
It adds up fast.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
It really does.
Yep.
Is there any age where people do not have to file taxes?
It
Or
goes
is it
forever.
right up until you hit the grade?
Goes up forever based on that low threshold of income.
Okay.
For single, married, makes no difference. Both
Okay.
and both federal and state are no different for that.
So sorry, everybody. We all share the responsibility.
Yes, we do. Yes,
I have
we
a
do.
humorous story about that. Years ago when I first started, some people might remember Anna Wilmot, who lived in Westfield, Granny Annie, who lived to be 107, I think. And I remember her telling me she was really adamant. Like she lobbied to the mayor at the time, who I think was Rick Sullivan, that she didn't think if she made it to, after 100, after she
Oh, is
became a
that
centenary,
right?
that she should have to pay her property taxes in Westfield.
Good luck
She
with
was
that.
not successful, but she certainly tried her best.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, good luck with that.
That's funny. So let's talk about any specific forms. You've mentioned that already, but just to recap a little bit, what are you looking for when they walk in the door?
So once they make an appointment with TINA staff, they come in and pick up a packet. And in there's an itemized list of what we need. So there's a federal checklist. We call it the intake form.
Okay.
There's a Massachusetts specialty things, the circuit breaker information as an example. Here's what you need to qualify for circuit breaker. And then the obvious things, if they have a job, they have bank interest, 401k withdrawals, pension payments, stock transactions, the things they get from the vendors, the banks, the financial institutions, all have to come in to be put into the, if we don't put it in, what the IRS does is they get copies of everything that you get in the mail, financial related or tax related. A copy of that electronically goes to the IRS. So we put it in over the next 3 years from the filing date. They have up to 3 years to match what you said you put in or you said you have to what the financial institutions had, and they match them. If there's something missing and it's significant enough for them to report, They might, if you get a $10 bank interest statement or something, you might not. Like the banks don't send you anything if you don't get $10.
Right.
If you tell me you had $6 in bank interest, we have to put it in. But if you forget it, the IRS they're not going to chase you for that. Although with their 87,000 new tax agents, if they get them IRS agents, who knows what level they're going to go to. We always want a copy of the previous year's tax return,
Okay, that's important.
whether we do it or not.
Okay.
We have a global carry forward, so whatever we put in for you this year comes up,
So you can see
historically.
okay.
and it's a good reminder. Last year you had interest from the Westfield Bank. Oh, I closed that account. Okay, fine. Oh, geez, I forgot that. I forgot about that.
Yeah,
I moved it from
right.
Westfield to Berkshire, or wherever I might have moved it
Right.
to. So it's an excellent reminder of what you had. You took a pension withdrawal. Well, I closed it, or I did a full payout. Okay, take it off the list. But it's a great reminder for them to do that. So we love, and we also look back if it's a return done by H&R Block or a private CPA. We always look at that to say, if their tax refund went up or down more than about $150, we go in and look and say why. So we can explain it to the taxpayer and say, well, you took out an extra $30,000 out of your pension for, you bought a new car. Well, they took it out, it's taxable. They may or may not have, they may have pushed them over the threshold for Social Security to be taxable,
Right.
or increased the percentage
Right.
that they didn't do a prepayment for, or a quarterly payment for, that increased their tax bill. They forgot about that.
Right.
This year's Social Security went up 8.7% this past year. So they're going to have a higher level of Social Security, what puts us up into a higher income bracket.
Oh,
But at
interesting.
8.7%, it's $300,000, $500,000 difference in somebody's Social Security, which could trigger, if they're on the borderline, it could push them over or push them under a little bit. So, but last year's tax return, and then again, important for property tax, water and sewer bills, we need a Social Security card and identifications so we know who you are. And put everything into the computer and it spits out I wouldn't want to do them by hand.
Yeah.
There's so many formulas and this carries to this form and that form.
Right.
The computer, been around for a long time, or at least 10 or 15 years of doing them with a computer versus trying to do them by hand. So,
I remember when I was young, I was doing my own taxes, and I learned, no, that's enough of that, Harry.
yeah, no question about it.
So, Tina, I'll switch gears here for a second and just talk about, we've been hearing about the process of the actual
Yeah.
going through and getting the forms done, but
Yes.
let's talk about your side of
Sure. Yeah, happy to do that
of the
because
office.
it's very important.
Right.
You know, as Dan said, we did, over 350 returns last year.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. It's a lot of work. There are a lot of moving parts. So what happened, Harry, was prior to the pandemic, people used to come in and sit down with the volunteer, the AARP volunteer, and they would do them together. The pandemic hit, then we were really messed up because, of course, as you remember, the pandemic, everyone closed their doors in March. Well, we had already done some, but then we had a whole lot of people that were scheduled that,
Oh, right.
we had to kind of scramble that year.
Think about that.
So the following year, when we came back, AARP pretty much had said, there is not going to be face-to-face here. So we're going to have to figure out a different way to do this. And so that became the drop off the paperwork, be available by phone so that the volunteer could call you, consult with you, ask you questions, clarify, whatever. And then the first couple years we did it, you would come back at the end of the day, stay in your car. And I can remember Bruce and Judy out there, the coordinators at the time, in all kinds of weather, and you'd actually sign off in your car. I think it was starting 2 years ago, we actually have people come in at the end of the day. So the way this process works is that the other thing that I did, I think 2 years ago, which really helped us out tremendously, maybe it was 3 years ago now, is we have a dedicated tax phone line. So when people call, and we will open up the tax phone line on Wednesday, January 3rd at 10 o'clock in the morning. So when people call and say, I want to have my taxes done, the clerk, Fran St. Peter, is going to say, fine, I will put you through to the tax line. We don't want to have a conversation with you. We don't want you to tell us on the phone, oh, I had my taxes done there last year, or I have 16 questions for you. It's like, no. If you want to have your taxes done here, we're going to put you through to the voicemail. You're going to get a voicemail, and it's basically going to say, give us your name, your address, and a phone number. Someone will get back to you within a 2-week period. We do that because last year, just to give you a for instance on the volume, the first day, because I handled all of those phone calls, I went to the voicemail, and all day I was just picking up calls. We had over 100 phone calls on day one.
Oh my gosh.
Day one.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh.
So what I do is we have little slips of paper, like a half sheet of paper. I document the date, the time that the person called, name, so forth. Then we can look up in our records and see, is this somebody that has had their taxes done here before or not? Are they a member? Because if you are going to have your taxes done at the Westfield Senior Center, you have to be a member of the Westfield Senior Center. Now, you don't have to be a member when you call, but so when we call to schedule the appointment, we're going to take down some additional information just to do the paperwork on you and get you into our books. Because that's for our purposes so that we can track all of this. It is, again, we keep reminding people, it is a free service. So when we start then doing the callbacks, when the clerk starts calling back to schedule the appointments, one of the first things they're going to ask is, when do you typically have all of your tax documents ready? Some people, as Dan said, have very few things that they're waiting for. And so, they're pretty much, so those are the people that we typically schedule at the beginning in early February. Some people will say to you, I never get X, Y, and Z documents that I need until mid-March. Okay, then we'll schedule you, but we're going to schedule you, and we'll start those schedules. So we've got the schedule going, right from the get-go. Some people are going to get scheduled right away. Some people will be on the schedule, but not until later in the process. And then once you have a scheduled appointment, then we're going to say to you, you can come down to the senior center, and we'll have the packet of information from Dan. So that's all. This is everything that you need. And there are so many checklists and so many, like you need XYZ, including last year's return, a copy of last year's return. And there's a confirmation letter that comes from us. And the confirmation letter says basically, here's your scheduled date. Now, there's no time. So what happens is it's a same-day drop-off pickup. So the drop-off period is between 8:45 and 9 o'clock in the morning. That's it. It's a 15-minute window. That's it, because you literally don't get out of your car. So as Dan said, so say we do 30 returns in a day. So I'm out there with, my team, my volunteers, and we're out there, and somebody from AARP is witnessing all of this because that's part of the protocol. And you're simply dropping it off. And when we send the packet of information, in the packet, along with the documentation that you need, is a plastic bag. The plastic bags are donated every year by Bay State Noble Hospital. They're the patient belonging bags. So those really great bags when you go for day surgery and it's got a tie string, but they're big enough. Everything goes in the bag, and we label the bag with your name. When you get your packet, it's got your name and the date when you're doing your return, and the fact that it's donated by Bay State Noble. So I had to give a shout out to them because they've been very, very generous with help. Because we were trying to figure out, how do we keep all this together? An envelope's not big enough and so forth. So you drop that off in the morning, and we tell people ahead of time. It's in the newsletter article. It's in the confirmation letter. It's on the phone when I leave, the message that people are going to hear. You have to be, this is a one-day process, but you have to be available. You have to drop your stuff off between 8:45 and 9. That's it. Not 9:30, not 10 o'clock, 8:45 to 9. You have to be available by phone throughout the day because we don't know when they're going to do your tax return.
Right.
And we don't know if they're going to be Some of them are fairly easy without a glitch. You might get a phone call, you might not. Some of them, it's phone calls back and forth. You have to be available for that. And then when they're all done, Dan is going to he's going to say, okay, Tina, we're finished. You can start calling people. And then they have to come back that same day. That's when they come into the building. So they're going to park the car. They're going to come into the building. They'll get a number when they come in. So as they come in, you'll be seated, and then you'll meet with whoever's reviewing the returns, not necessarily the person who did yours, and sign off on it, and then it'll be filed electronically. But it all has to be done the same day. We don't store. I don't want the documentation that you drop off to me,
Right.
I don't want to be responsible for that overnight in a closet, in a bin, locked up. I mean, my safe is fairly small.
Right.
You know, it's mostly for our COA money. Like, we don't have room to store 25 tax return documents that people have. I can't tell you the number of people who come through that line at 8:45 and I say, okay, again, here's yet another sheet of paper with the guidelines saying you have to be able, oh, well, I have a doctor's appointment today. Well, what time are they going to do it? Well, I don't think I can come back this. Well, I work. I can't come back on this day. It's like when you schedule that appointment, you get one shot at this. So I've gotten to the point now where I'm pretty, curt with people when they drop their stuff off. If you can't do this as it's laid out, we can't do your taxes because it's just not, it's not fair to these people are as Dan said, they're volunteering their time.
Right.
And, when we call you and they'll say, well, what time are you going to call and tell me it's time to pick up? I don't know. It might be 1 o'clock. It might be 3 o'clock. I don't know.
Right.
So you have to be available. So either, when you schedule that appointment, you have to make sure that you're leaving that whole day open. Everything may be done by, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but I can't guarantee that. So I can't guarantee that if you start your job at 3 o'clock, that you're going to be finished with us and ready to go to work. I don't know that when you schedule your appointment in February. Right. And, we always have people, we always have more people that want to have it done than we can provide services for.
Oh,
so,
that's interesting.
So we say to people, you have to be able to follow these guidelines. And by the way, it's for free. It's for free. I mean, I'm sorry, but, I have to keep coming back to that because we have people that it's like, well, they expect us to work around them. It's like there are 360 of you, and we don't have the staff to do that. So I will say the vast majority of people follow all the guidelines. They understand, especially people that have done it with us before. Right. They get the whole protocol, and 99.9% are so appreciative. They do understand it's for free. And if they had to pay to have this done, it could be several $100s.
Oh, absolutely.
So, it's worth it. And I do understand, emergencies happen. People get sick. That's a different story. And in that case, you call as soon as you know that, and we will do our very best to try to fit you in. It's going to be down the road, probably at the very end of tax season, but we'll try to get you in. But the other thing that frosts me, and I'll tell you I keep track of it, is the people who just don't, the no-shows.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. And every once in a while, because we have the people that, they senior center surf. It's like they'll see, well, where can I get an appointment first?
Is that right?
Yeah. And my problem with that is that then you need to call us and say, you know what? I'm going to be going to Southwick, or I'm going to be going to West Springfield,
So
or
you
for
can
whatever
open that
reason.
spot for someone else.
And it opens it up for somebody else. That's fine if you give us enough notice. But the no-shows, and we're calling, oh, yeah, didn't I call you and tell you? No, I'm done. Or my son did it for me, which is wonderful. But I can't call somebody on the list the day of and say, oh, an appointment, is opened, and we have volunteers waiting. So we've gotten to be pretty strict about it. But on the other hand, we have everything spelled out for people. Yeah. There's no wiggle room for I didn't get it. It's all in there. So same day. It's same day drop off. It doesn't get any more convenient. I'm the one standing out there in the, 20-degree weather. You don't have to get out of your car. You're just they're just handing me the stuff. I'm just reviewing. Just remember, you go home. Sometimes people will say, do I have time to stop and get a coffee? I'm like, maybe. You stop and get a coffee and then get home. And the other thing that people will say is, well, they can just call me on my cell. I'll be out shopping. And I'll say to people, this is your private financial. Do you really want to be in TJ Maxx talking to, Dan or one of the other volunteers about your personal finances? I don't think so. It's not really appropriate. So people just have to keep that in mind.
Yeah. No, those are great points. Absolutely. It's a shame, though, that people don't always respect the process and understand that it is a free service. But again, these are volunteers. So we certainly remind people to be honest with everyone and to be respectful of your spot and make sure that if you're going to use it, that's wonderful. But if you find that you don't need it, please call in and cancel that so that we can get someone else registered for it. I was just curious. I was thinking about this. How long is it average? What's the average amount of time, or is there an average amount of time for a volunteer to work through a tax return?
That's probably just a rough draft. Would be between 45 minutes and 2 hours.
Oh, okay.
We'll do each of our people will do between 3 and 4 a day is kind of what I schedule. Because not only doing the return, but then as soon as you finish one, we check them off the list that we've done the 25 or 30 on the list today, and initial. Okay, I did this one. I did this one. Then somebody else initials a list that said they reviewed it, and then it goes in the pile that we can give to Tina to set up appointments.
So when we talk about the 350, 360 returns that you're doing, is that, I'm sure you've calculated out, I have X number of volunteers, it takes X amount of time, X number of hours that they're working every day. Is that the maximum number that you can accommodate?
We can add 2 or 3 others. If somebody's got an emergency, comes in.
Right, but basically that's about
Yep.
your
We
limit.
do between 26 and 30 a day. Is what.
Wow.
Go ahead and schedule them.
That's significant.
You may get a no-show or somebody gets sick, you take it off the
Right.
list. But we could easily handle 27, 28, up to 30 a day.
Wow.
We always keep the last 2 days of the tax season as well, because it's going to snow sometime.
Yeah.
You're right.
And the schools get closed, the senior center's closed. You got to move 28 people to another day, so we keep a couple on the back end for
Right.
Yep.
for those situations.
Right.
Been there, done that, and had that problem. So
Yeah.
Wow.
one other thing that I just wanted to mention, it popped in my head when Tina was talking, is we're encouraging everybody to try to do their returns, both federal and state, as a direct deposit.
Yes.
That's
Oh.
one more way. Number one, you get to check 2 to 4 weeks sooner from the IRS if you're owed money, and Massachusetts. The later in the season you file, the longer it takes because you get busier at the IRS. But try to do a direct deposit. All we need is a blank check marked void, so we can have the right bank account routing number and the bank account number, whether it's a checking account or savings account. We get more and more every year. We can actually even do, if you owe money, we give you a payment coupon, or you can do a direct debit or a direct debit right to your account and take the money out on whenever you want it done. Again, it's just one less check you got to write to get it paid. But we're encouraging so that somebody doesn't steal that check out of your mailbox.
Right.
Yeah.
Do a direct deposit. It comes again 2 to 4 weeks sooner than if you're waiting for a check to come in the mail.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Tina, is there anything else on your side of the equation that we haven't talked about that
No,
we need
I
to
would-
remind people
I don't
about?
think so. I think, well, again, I keep summarizing by saying this entire process for the day of when your return is done is going to necessitate 2 trips to the senior center, 1 in the morning, and you've got that very small window, and then 1 sometime in the afternoon. And we can't be exact on that until, at the behind the scenes, as Dan said, there are piles ever. So this pile, and I don't just go in and reach pile. It's like, no, because this pile, the first preparer has done it, but it hasn't been reviewed yet. So
Right.
it has to wait till it gets here, and then over here's my pile. Then it's like, okay, Tina, now you can start calling people, and then we'll pull whichever volunteers are actually going to sit with people when they come in and just review the return, and that's generally pretty short, from when they come in and they sit down with the preparer, because in most cases they've been on the phone with the preparer. So
Okay.
again, I would just for me, it's just that people keep in mind that because this is volunteer, it's really nice when you say things like "thank you" to not necessarily to me. I don't need it, but to the volunteers. It's really important. They are doing a tremendous service. I certainly couldn't do this. I can tell you that.
Right.
So yeah.
So
We're a lot more efficient with the drop-off model because we can go from one return to the next.
right.
When we did it in person, I love talking to the people. You can ask them things that, did you do this or did you do that or did you have this or that? And they typically can answer the question right on the spot. Now you can do it over the phone, which is fine. But I miss talking to the people. But if I finished with your return and everybody else is doing, the other 7 people doing returns, it still has to be reviewed. So you got to go sit somewhere until somebody else finishes with their tax client in front of them, and then they can review your returns. You may be there for an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours.
Yeah, the difference is when we did it in person, you not only had a date, you had a time, and we had to figure out based on the information, like my staff had to figure out based on the information, how long should we allow, how long do we need for this appointment?
Right.
Now it's just a day. You don't have a time. Your drop-off time, I can tell you right now, 8:45 to 9 o'clock. Your pickup time it will depend on how long it takes. So now the scheduling on our end is much easier because it's just a matter of, Harry, do you typically have all of the documents that you need for your tax preparation? And you tell us usually mid-March, the beginning of March, I have them right away. And then that just dictates the day that we're going to pick.
Right.
And if you work, then don't pick a day that you work unless you want to take the day off. Or, if you have a doctor's appointment scheduled that far in advance. Some people will say, I've had this doctor's appointment for 8 months. Mm-hmm. Well, then you knew about it. What did you, so schedule around that. We're, especially at the beginning, we have lots of wiggle room here for the days, but, let's try to get it right the first time.
Right. Dan, anything else that we haven't covered that you think we should share with our viewers?
No, tax time is coming. It comes every year. It's the same time period, February, March, April 15th. I think we can get more returns done. Our staff of volunteers in Westfield is very experienced. I got the ultimate confidence in what we do. We have fun doing it. One of our tax preparers brings us cookies every Monday. So we have cookies to look forward to every Monday from his wife. So it's a fun effort that people love what they do. They love doing it. It's a labor of love, so to speak, of doing it for typically senior citizens. And they'll call in after the season. They'll get a Dear John letter or Dear Harry letter from the Mass. If somebody files for a circuit breaker for the first time, we always tell them, you're going to get a letter.
You're going to get a letter.
From the state of Massachusetts and ask for like 3 different, it's easy. Fill in these 3 things and send it back to them, but they'll always audit that every time. Every time they'll audit it. So we just give them a heads up. Don't panic when you see the envelope come from the Department of Revenue or the IRS. So the senior center knows that they can call me anytime of the year, and I'll get back to a taxpayer.
And we do.
Answer their questions. I'll go meet them if we have to file an amended return. We probably did 6 amended returns, 6 or 8, so you make a mistake or they forget to have something. So it's a very small percentage. If we have to do it, we do everything and do a handoff back to the taxpayer. So it's
right.
It's a great service that we provide. We love doing it. So,
well, I want to say thank you to you and your volunteer team. Again, to our viewers, this is all volunteer. They're not getting paid. They're doing it because they choose to, because they want to, and because they want to help their fellow senior citizens. And that's a truly noble cause, and they should all be genuinely thanked and let them know that we appreciate the effort. There are a couple of key points here as we wrap up that I want to go through. Tina, a lot of information coming through here, and I cannot believe how fast this time went by.
Yeah.
But there will be a dedicated phone line being established on January 3rd. You will be starting the actual tax process of bringing in returns and getting them done on February 5th.
yes.
April 17th is the deadline, so you want to have that in mind and keep the stress levels down, get all that stuff in ahead of time. Make sure you have all your forms. Recognize that it is a day process and you need to be available, so you have your drop-off at 8:45, and that sometime in the afternoon you will get your call to come in for review and then to also get all of your returns back. It's highly confidential. Everything is coming back to you the same day. Nothing is being kept overnight in the senior center. And there is a lot to the tax code. So don't think that you probably know it all, and there's always changes. So come in, see Dan and his team of volunteer experts, because they're going to really help you get everything done. But definitely take advantage. If you think you qualify, definitely take advantage. And Tina, one last question. Is this on your website? Is there information on this on the website?
All the information is always in the newsletter, and the newsletter is on the website.
Okay.
So this is,
in the newsletter.
They will be in the January newsletter on page 3. And I tried this year to simplify it, and I made bullet points.
Okay.
This is what you need to do instead of like one paragraph form, because I'm hoping that maybe that will help people to just understand. The checklist, they will have a checklist, and so when they come back, so they're signing saying this is what I dropped off in the morning, and they're signing saying that you're giving me all of that back later on in the afternoon. So.
Well, okay, so watch for that newsletter,
absolutely.
Which is always chock full of information
It is.
anyway. I always read through the whole thing. because I'm always anxious, not anxious, I'm always interested in just seeing what you have. But I want to say thanks. This was a fascinating interview. Really enjoyed it. Tina Gorman, Council on Aging Special Projects Coordinator, and Dan Welch, Local Tax Coordinator for the AARP. Dan, thank you so much for your volunteer work. It's amazing to me how involved this is and how much time you're investing in this. But thanks to you on behalf of our seniors for sure. Special thanks to Pete Coles, our WCPC Westville Cable Channel 15 manager and producer, for his help to make sure that this show is possible. And so on behalf of Pete Coles, Mike Squindo, Tina Gorman, I am Harry Rock. This has been another edition of the Westville Council on Aging Presents on WCPC Westville Cable Channel 15. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks so much.